Hello everyone, let's talk about fall. We are getting much closer to fall, and even though it's still mid-August, we're starting to see some signs that a seasonal transition is beginning, not just with the ENSO phase, but with the Arctic as well. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But let's go in and just run through some of the climate model data, just kind of give you guys an idea of what we could expect. And we'll have a prediction out later in this video. Stay tuned for that. We'll talk about fall. We'll sum everything up in this video in just a few minutes. So here we go. We'll take a look at the European season and we'll look at a couple other models as well. Go ahead and go throughout time. This is September. Now the European does have a little bit of a warm bias. We're going to use it anyway. We'll compare it to other guidance as well. So the European suggests the temperatures could be a little bit above average across parts of the south and the southeast throughout much of September. I do think temperatures are going to lean a little more near to maybe a little below average for the northern plains, the Midwest, and the Northeast. And that is assuming that the troughing pattern does continue across parts of eastern Canada and digs down into those regions. If it doesn't, temperatures may still lean near to a little above average throughout much of September. But we'll see how that troughing pattern evolves if we continue to see that troughing across parts of the regions, or we see it hang a little bit further north, and that will filter in some warmer air from that ridge down south. Temperatures may be a little near normal to a little below average across parts of the southwest, and I think that monsoonal activity will continue throughout September. I think we will see a little more prolonged monsoonal season for the southwest in September, and temperatures a little above average across parts of the northwestern states. Going into October, temperatures could be near average for much of the northern plains, Great Lakes, and Northeast, perhaps even continuing to be a little near average across parts of the southwest. Now, I do think, again, depending on how the upper air pattern evolves across parts of Canada and the Great Lakes, temperatures could be sort of near to a little below average across parts of the Midwest and Northeast. Temperatures still going to be a little near average across parts. I don't know why I keep saying little near average. Near average across parts of the southern plains and the southwest. Temperatures a little above average across the southeast as we continue to see a high pressure sit across the south even into October. Temperatures above average across parts of the western states. Going into November, that is when I think we start to see more of our El Niño pattern really show itself. Late fall and into early winter, I think we will see more of that traditional and strong El Niño pattern develop. Cooler across the south, warmer to the north, as we do see temperatures more above average across parts of Canada, and that will filter into parts of the Midwest and Northeast. I do think much of early fall will be near to below average for the Midwest. That could change as we go into into the latter half of fall. Again, you'll see all of this summed up in our unofficial outlook later in this video in just a few minutes. The temperatures are going to be likely going to be a little above average for the West. Now, if we see more of that Pacific jet set up earlier rather than later, temperatures could be a little below average across parts of the West, especially the southwestern states. I think temperatures could be a little below average and also stormier as well. We'll take a look at precip. Look at the seasonal precip anomalies. Fairly wet across the south. I think this is going to be a fairly good prediction. Mostly wet across the south. Now, I think much of early fall, September and into October, is going to be below average in terms of precip and remain above average across parts of the West. That script could flip as we go later into fall. And then sort of a mixed bag up here across parts of the northern plains, mostly dry across parts of the Pacific Northwest, and then mostly still above average across parts of the Midwest and Northeast. We'll take a look at the CFS. We'll just continue to look at precip anomalies for September, October, November. That's our forecast period from September 1st to November 30th. Now, the CFS depicts a very dry southeast for much of fall. Now, this is attributed to a very dry September and into early October. That's why it shows precip anomalies below average, but it does show November being above average. Now, again, like I mentioned a second ago, I do think precip will be below average for the southeast in September. There could be a couple of wet periods, a few days that are quite wet that could steer some areas near to above average. But I think for the overall month of September and for the overall region, precip could lean below average. But I don't think seasonally we do see precip below average. I don't see that happening. I do think we see a wet southwest as we continue to see that prolonged monsoonal season into September. And then perhaps also some influence of an earlier onset of the Pacific and subtropical jet streams going into the latter half of fall. And then sort of, again, a mixed bag up here across parts of the northern west and northern plains. I think equal chances for either above or below or near normal could develop across the northern plains through fall. The CANSIPS suggest very wet conditions across parts of the southeast, much of the southeast and east coast. This is well above average. Precip anomalies for fall are 6 inches above normal. Now, of course, the CANSIPS, this is just an overall seasonal guidance. So, it's going to vary depending on your location. Not everyone's going to see, 6 inches above average precip across the east coast. I do think that the CANSIPS is also hinting very well at that early onset of the Pacific jet. If that does happen, again, it is still an if. We'll have to see when that sets up. But stormier conditions evolve across much of the west. A little more optimistic about precip across the Pacific Northwest, but I do think that precip could perhaps lean near to below average for at least the first half of fall, perhaps flipping late fall. But the CANSIPS does depict near to above average precip across parts of the northern plains. So I think equal chances across parts of the northern plains, wet across the southeast, and then wet across the southwest as well. We'll take a look at temperatures off the CANSIPS for the seasonal average. And temperatures near to a little below average across parts of the plains, midwest, and northeast. Temperatures near to above average across parts of the southeast, and temperatures above average across the west. Now, I do think that the first half of fall, September and into October, we're going to see temperatures above average across the southeast. And then later in fall, sometime around October, November, we do see temperatures below average as the subtropical jet moves in. We see more gloomy, cloudy, rainy days across the southeast that will keep temperatures cooler across the south going into the latter half of fall. And then maybe more of a mixed bag to maybe below average across parts of the northern plains. The CANSIPS is one of the more optimistic models for cooler temperatures across parts of the northern plains. But again, our seasonal prediction in a little bit will sum that all together. Let's go ahead and check in how our El Nino is doing. You can find it pretty easily here in the equatorial Pacific. Very above average temperatures, very above average waters across parts of the equatorial Pacific. And that will continue to only get warmer and also spread a little bit further west as we get into fall. Now, ENSO isn't always the main driver in our falls and winters here in North America, but due to the strength of this El Nino, it's going to play a bigger role than normal across North America this fall and winter. We still have to factor in oscillations like the PDO, the Pacific oscillation, also factor in the Atlantic and also the Arctic oscillations this fall and winter, both the shorter term and longer term. The MJO will also matter as well. Everything in our atmosphere and across the globe is connected, so we're not just going to look at the ENSO. It is a primary driver. And of course, we'll also look at the analogs as well right above me. Those are the analogs that I'm most interested in for this fall. Of course, the analogs will change a little bit as we get into winter, as not all, the ENSO isn't the only player in seasonal forecasting. Let's go and take a look at our unofficial temperature and precip outlooks for this fall from September 1st to November 30th. We'll begin with temperatures. We expect mostly above average temperatures across the western US through at least the first half of fall, with perhaps a trend towards cooler temps later in fall. Frequent deviations are possible. Mostly normal temperatures are expected across much of the central US, but some deviations to above or below normal temperatures are very possible at times. Finally, below average temperatures will likely be destroyed for at least a good chunk of fall across the Midwest, Northeast, and far southern plains and Rockies. Non-shaded areas have equal chances of above, below, or normal temperatures, so at least most of fall. This also applied to the Precip forecast. Speaking of Precip, we're forecasting slightly below average precipitation across much of the Pacific Northwest. Early fall could see normal to wetter than average conditions across the region, but a drier than normal period will likely set up later in fall. We expect near average precip across much of the central US. Some spells of weather conditions are possible early this fall, but a trend towards drier than average conditions may develop in late fall. For now, we expect precip to be mostly near average. Then finally, weather than average conditions should be present across much of the southwestern and eastern US as the subtropical jet slowly ramps up throughout fall. Some drier spells could develop across parts of the southwestern or central US mid to late fall, but a wet early fall should keep seasonal precip at least slightly above average. Finally, we'll close this video off looking at the CPC outlooks for September, October, and November. Now, it does suggest temperatures will be above average across pretty much the entirety of the East Coast, all the way back into the West. Now, one thing to note about the CPC, they do like to be fairly warm during the fall and winter. Now, they're generally a little bit better with precip, and I do think that the precip outlook is fairly accurate. I do expect more above average precip across more of the East Coast into fall, but I think they got the Southwest pretty accurate based on the latest model guidance. Now, of course, this could change as we get closer to fall. In fact, these outlooks are a month old. I think they do update them very soon, so sometime next couple of days we should get an update on these seasonal outlooks. Of course, we'll have more updates throughout the rest of summer and into fall. If you're curious about winter, get subscribed so you don't miss any of that information on our winter prediction coming up sometime around September, October, maybe as late as early November. So that'll do it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.